and people would pay to come in and view these little babies because they were like kind of considered freaks at the time.
Murders, mysteries, unexplained stories, and our family's crazy opinions on them all. Join us now. The Family School of Thought is in session.
Okay, welcome everybody to this week's version of the Family School of Thought. Hope everybody had a nice week, had a nice weekend. Let's start out with the weather out in there, Portland.
It rained today for about 2 minutes, and that was the first time in
Wow.
months. Yeah, it was the first time in months, so it was like really exciting, but then it quickly ended, and it's sunny again. Sunny and hot.
And it's still hot out here.
Yeah, well, it wasn't super hot today. It was only like 85, so it's cooling down a bit.
I heard
Not
somebody
in a
say
heat wave.
Sunday it was 101. Does that sound right?
That sounds about right. And I was in a kitchen all day.
Oh man.
Yikes.
We had a hot weekend, but
Yes.
Monday it
Muggy.
rained all day, but Saturday
It was
hot.
muggy. Muggy.
Muggy.
Well, and I had the oven going, so that did not help.
Right.
Normally that cabin is not that hot, but because I had the oven on Saturday.
It was
and-
muggy outside.
Yeah,
so
it was.
it
but
was just muggy all around.
it felt really good in the lake.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah, wasn't because of your oven. The whole place was, whole town was
Yeah.
muggy.
Yeah.
Okay, Jess, how's the weather where you're at?
It was good today. Good today. You know, nice, perfect weather. Yesterday, so I got a story. Yesterday we had dentist appointments. We came home and the power was out at our house. And so our garage door wasn't working. And I no longer keep a key, or I no longer had kept a key on my key ring to our storm door because it just never, when you lock it, it won't, like, the key won't come back out. So I'm like, what's the point of this, you know? So we were locked out of our house yesterday for a few hours
That's the point.
because we couldn't open the storm door. And so we tried breaking into our own house to no avail.
So
Then we
what did-
decided we went to Meijer and just kind of walked around and came home with frozen food. And on the way home, I'm like, man, we just bought frozen food. Like, what are we going to do? We can't get into our house. And thankfully, when we got back about a half hour later, the power kicked back on. So, yeah.
That's good.
Good
Didn't have
thing.
to put the door down.
But it was hot and it was like muggy out yesterday. So we were sitting in our driveway in the car with the air conditioning running because we couldn't figure out what to do. So it was a fun time in the mugginess.
And I sure hope that I said, I don't understand why you just didn't break that
The
door
key-
handle because.
we did because
they
yeah,
gave you an excuse to get a new door.
well, that's what I mean. We're planning on getting a new door anyway, so we're like, okay, you know, like, what can we do? But the door handle came off, you know, because the door handle is stripped anyway. So, but we couldn't get we were trying to like fit like zip ties and stuff in there to unlock the door, and we couldn't get it to work. So I was waiting for police to drive by and wondering why we're trying to break into a house in the middle of the day. You know, but
You couldn't call a locksmith or anything?
well, that's it. I'm like, if it would have been to a point where we couldn't get in, you know, but we so something happened in our neighborhood because it was
Lesson
our-
learned, don't lock that screen door.
well, no, I put the key on my key ring. I put it back on my key ring because it does unlock the door. It just, you can't lock it.
It takes,
for some reason.
yeah.
So, but it was something
Is your
happened in our
back door
neighborhood.
normally locked?
It doesn't have a lock to unlock it.
You couldn't get around your
But yeah,
fence?
we keep it locked all the time. Yeah, we keep it locked.
Oh,
all the
got it.
time.
Yeah, okay, got it.
Yeah. So, yeah.
I was thinking you just hop the fence and going through the sliding door.
Yeah, no, that's locked all the time. So,
Okay. For the best. Shouldn't put on a podcast that you don't lock your door.
Yeah, we don't lock our
no,
door.
we keep everything locked down. So, Yep. Yep. So
Hmm.
that was our interesting day with the mugginess.
Lesson learned. Lesson learned.
So I'm just gonna move right in though to my amazing facts, my mental floss amazing facts. So I got a couple of them. So when the first platypus specimen was sent back to England from Australia in the late 18th century, the scientists who examined it thought that it was somebody playing a trick on them. It's quoted as saying, it naturally excites the idea of some deceptive preparation by artificial means. Zoologist George Shaw wrote in the first scientific description of the platypus. And that was published in 1799. And it wasn't yet known that they laid eggs. So.
Oh,
I didn't know that platypus. I thought that they had babies.
Nope.
Mm.
And then I have another amazing fact, which I'm interested to see. So historically, pineapples were a symbol of wealth, and people used to rent them out to take to parties and to carry around in order to look rich. Did you guys know that?
no, I did
I
not.
did not know that.
There are other symbols that pineapples are known for now. You guys know. Well, one, how many pineapples do you guys see in Grandpa's community down in Florida?
Oh, don't say that. Don't tell me that.
Okay. I know the answer to this, and I'm not answering it.
Okay.
I
Well,
know-
Pineapples.
isn't
What?
isn't he known as Swinging Billy down there?
He used to be. Now he's Danielle's grandpa.
Yeah.
But
So pineapples, specifically upside down pineapples, symbolize swingers. So if you
that's
see
not
it,
what I was thinking. Okay.
no, if you see an upside down pineapple,
Or
either
if you
steer
get
clear if you're not into that, or join
Yeah.
the party.
or if you get invited to a party and you notice that their house has a lot of
Oh, we're gonna go
pineapple
for it.
decor,
I have a pineapple.
you might have
upside-
to turn over
Like-
your car keys,
Hey,
into a
What
fishbowl.
does it mean when you love pineapple upside down cake?
That's beyond me, but
That's one of my favorites.
I wonder if that was a dessert created for a swinging party.
Wow.
maybe. But it has to be
Got the
upside
cherry
down
on top.
because pineapples also are a symbol for like a lot of it's in the infertility community. A lot of people use it as a symbol of like hope and fertility
Well,
stuff.
pineapple juice
That I
is
didn't know.
supposed to be
Mhm.
helpful too.
Yeah, it's helpful to your health.
Well,
Sexually.
Yeah.
Help.
Yeah, well, yes, pineapples is supposed to help with fertility issues. So it's like a symbol of hope.
Well, it's
There you
supposed to help in other ways too.
Yes.
Anyways.
Thanks
There
for
you
the
go.
fact, Jess.
Those are my facts, okay?
Okay. I'm gonna be watching for those pineapples now. Upside down. Seems like if you've seen an upside down pineapple, you'd say, hey, that's upside down.
It's
a
meant to be.
conversation starter.
Yep.
And
Why is
they
it upside down?
And they say, yes, it is.
Funny you should say.
I for sure won't mention it if I see.
It's one of those things like if you know, you know. So
I'll be nudging your mom like, look.
yeah,
Okay, interesting.
there you go.
Kat, let's hear your song.
All right, it's not about swingers.
It's about
And
the
I
Hamptons. Did you see him on Good Morning America this morning or this week? Yesterday.
Yeah. John Anderson, there's a little girl in our neighborhood. Her name is Charlotte Johnson. Somewhere it gets into swinger, and we were swinging. We were swinging. The song.
got it.
Yes, I know the
Yeah.
song. Yeah.
Okay. I thought that's what you're getting into.
It's also not that song.
Oh,
And I do think I want to do a little bit of a
can you guess what this song is about?
Okay.
So I'm going to play the clip, and then I'm going to read you some of the lyrics and see if you can guess what it's about.
Okay.
So the song is Disappearing Syndrome by Hail the Sun. And the lyrics are that you heard were flowing through the water pipes. She's there, stuck in time. The elevator camera hints at what could have happened.
Oh, so this
I
is
wonder
about
I wonder if the walls
The
spoke.
hotel girl.
Yeah, yeah. And it's even got lyrics such as, "Did she feel the pain before she left a splash?" But yeah, the song is about
a cool
Eliza
song.
Lamb.
I actually heard this song not too long ago, and I
Yeah.
thought about you, Cassie.
Well, I was also thinking, I'm really mad that this is like happening again because it's happened to Duffy too.
Maybe
But
it's just
yeah,
certain songs they won't let you
Maybe
do it.
it's Lisa.
Eliza doesn't want you to hear the
Eliza.
song. I don't know.
On a podcast, maybe.
Maybe. No, I don't think that's it. But there you go. It's Disappearing Syndrome. It's about Eliza Lamb's disappearance and subsequent death in the Cecil Hotel. So it's a fairly, I mean, obviously it's like very on the surface creepy, but if you didn't know about Eliza Lamb before you heard the song, you'd probably be pretty confused about what happened. There you go.
Wow. Okay. Jess.
Yes. So I have a story that is a little bit happier than what we're used to. But doesn't involve death,
Does it involve
really.
Trump getting Mar-a-Lago raided?
No. But it
No?
doesn't involve like any deaths, really. It's a very happy story.
Good.
And
I like
I
that.
just thought it would be a fun, it's more fascinating than murder mystery-ish. So just thought we'd throw one of these happy ones in there for you, everybody. So we've all heard of P.T. Barnum, right?
Yeah.
We all know who P.T. Barnum
Yeah, the
is.
circus.
The circus, yeah. So he was pretty famous about bringing, the freaks and making a freak show, calling it a circus, all that. And they were sideshows that were, traveling around the world. But there was one person that has kind of been, attributed to P.T. Barnum as well, that he had a sideshow that wasn't about freaks so much as it was premature babies. Have you guys heard about this?
We talked about this, it seems like, for something else.
Maybe I
I
told you about this. So
I thought you were going to talk about the world's ugliest lady who was like,
no.
took advantage of that.
No. So this is about a doctor who created the Incubator, and it was a sideshow at the Coney Island.
You did tell us about this before.
Maybe I did. So in the early 1900s, he started showing it in the United States. But in Coney Island, he had two different parks, but he had rows of tiny premature babies that were living in these glass and metal incubators, and people would pay to come in and view these little babies because they were like kind of considered freaks at the time. And at the time, doctors didn't want to deal with them because they were considered weaklings, and the world was just trying to get rid of them. Basically, you lived or you died, but if you can't survive, that was God's will, basically. So Dr. Martin Couney, I think is how you pronounce his last name. He is kind of he's credited for saving thousands of the United States, the America country, premature babies, thousands of them. He ran his incubator sideshow from 1903 to early like 1940s. I think 1943 is when he kind of shut down. That's where I've seen it. That's what I've seen a couple times. So he was born in it. So it's changed. So, and I was just looking this up. He was born in what was Prussia, Germany. From what I can see, in 1869, which is now Poland. So during World War II, Poland took over that country, which kind of a side note, that's where Matt's grandpa was from Prussia. So interesting little fun fact right there. But he wasn't the first doctor to use an incubator. The first doctor ever to use an incubator was a French obstetrician named Dr. Stéphane Tarnay. I'm gonna go with that pronunciation of his name. He witnessed the incubator being used for chickens, baby chickens and chicken eggs, and hatching them, and had a thought. He saw this at the zoo and he's like, why don't we do this for humans and human babies? And so in the late 1870s, he started creating the incubator. And Dr. Martin Couney, I saw in some of my research that he was like an apprentice to Dr. Tarnay, but then I also saw somewhere that he was an apprentice to a student of Dr. Tarnay. So I'm not really exactly sure how, but they worked together in some sort of way. And so he kind of learned everything from this French doctor. And through the years, from 1870 through the years, the technology grew and they worked. And in 1896, Dr. Martin Coney, he entered the Berlin Exposition, and he entered this incubator with a premature baby as a part of the exhibit, like a science fair type thing. And that was his first show, and it was this huge success, and people were fascinated with coming and seeing this. So he started to tour Europe, basically, and do these little sideshows with these babies and incubators. And then after realizing how much of a success it was, he brought it over to the United States, to Coney Island, and he had his first exhibit at Luna Park, Coney Island, and then he opened a second exhibit shortly after at Dreamland in Coney Island, and had all these babies that were, doctors were saying, oh, there's no point in trying, they're going to die anyways. He would just take them and put them in his little sideshow. So many of the infants that were part of it came from the local maternity wards, and they weren't expected to live. And his daughter was actually a premature baby, born 6 weeks early, and was actually one of the babies that was in the exhibit at Coney Island. And with this, he charged 25 cents admission to come see these babies. And because of that admission fee, he was able to use that money to pay for the nurses and doctors that he had on staff round the clock, along with everything that was needed to pay for the baby's care and the incubators. And so the parents that had children in these incubators were never charged to have their kids in the care. So they were just taken care of with a rotation of nurses and doctors and wet nurses. And he used the exhibit to offer a standard of technological care that was not being matched by any other hospital or any hospital at that time. So basically, when these babies were born, the doctors were telling the parents, well, it's a premature baby, it's not going to live long, it's not going to have a successful life, just deal with it, basically. And so he wanted to help these parents and help these infants. He was really dedicated to it. In my research, it kind of really does sound like he almost like stole the idea from another doctor, but it was, he made it successful here in the United States, where in in France, the first incubator was introduced into a hospital in 1880. It wasn't introduced to a hospital in the United States until around 1950. So it was like in the 1940s,
Did he
1950s.
really steal it? I mean,
I don't think so. I think that they worked together on it, and then he realized, doing it as a sideshow was able to bring notoriety to it. And so he, why the other doctor worked on, making it better, he kind of was the marketing person to it. I did find in some of the stuff that he wasn't a real doctor. I don't know. I can't confirm or really deny that. But I don't know. He's pretty well known and for the inventor, kind of creator of the incubator. But he would often get really irked by the idea that just because he was working at Coney Island, people were, thought his work was a joke, but he always thought, like just because I'm at Coney Island, it wasn't that he wasn't doing this in the best interest for these kids and for their health. He was doing what he could, and he was using any means that he could to basically pay for it and afford to have the babies stay alive there. But he was also, even though he was, wanted to be taken seriously, which I think he was in some sense, but he also, it was a sideshow. So he would dress the infant or the infants, the premature infants, in like overly big clothes to make them look smaller. And they would do little tricks. One of the nurses that worked for him would bring a diamond ring and would show the audience the diamond ring and then slide it up the infant's arms to show how tiny they actually, and emphasize how tiny they actually were. So it's like they did use the kids, the babies, to kind of bring more attention to the shows, but it also, that attention brought more families in as well too. So but yeah, the incubators in the United States weren't really introduced and accepted into the American hospitals until it was around the time he died, which was in 1950. So he was kind of like one of the, his work wasn't really recognized until after his death, basically.
Really
for
see
that.
the benefits of his vision.
Yeah, right. So and so one of the babies, though, it was in 1920, Lucille Horn was born, weighing 2 pounds, and she was a twin born to her parents. Her twin died during birth, and the doctors told her parents that she wasn't going to survive. She weighed 2 pounds. She was going to die as well. Her dad remembered the sideshow, going to Coney Island on his honeymoon with his wife, and said, no, she's still alive. I'm going to do what it takes to keep her alive. And so he wrapped her in a blanket, left the hospital, hailed a taxi, and told the taxi driver to go to Coney Island, and took her straight to the exhibit. And she was taken in, put into an incubator, and she stayed in the incubator and part of the sideshow for 6 months. And then she was released, and she lived to be 96 years old.
wow.
So he saved her life
Right.
with that. And so, and then I did see she did like a story, she kind of told her story on that. And one of there's, I think it was NPR. She did a news story, and she ended up, giving him a lot of credit. She wouldn't have been alive if it wasn't for him, but she, as an adult, went back as a visitor to see all the babies that were still there, and introduce herself to Dr. Coney, and kind of show off, it worked, and show the people that were there that it worked. And his daughter was one of the sideshow babies as well, and she ended up being a nurse in the exhibits as well, taking care of some of the babies. But the sideshow did grow in popularity through the years, and it was even part of the Chicago World Fair in 1930s and 1933 rather, and 1934, and they built an exhibit in Chicago for that World Fair, and it cost $75,000 to build that exhibit with all the incubators, and he took like 58 babies with him. I think, if I'm understanding it right, he took 58 babies with him over there as part of the sideshow or part of the World Fair exhibit. And he worked there with Dr. Julius Hess, who is known today as the father of the American neonatology, which is where the NICU comes from. He created the NICU, the neo intensive care unit.
Haas
So
is a name.
you have these. What?
Yeah, Haas is a big name. I hear that.
Yeah, Hess.
Oh.
Hess.
Oh.
So, but it was a huge success in Chicago. So then after the Chicago World Fair, it grew even more attention and brought more people over to Coney Island. But there he charged only 25 cents, that, which was a lot of money back then too, but he charged 25 cents. And out of the 58 babies that he took there, like 40, I think 42 of them survived and were able to be brought back home. And there was a big to-do and a big homecoming for the 42 that came back. Out of I saw a couple different numbers, but there was around 8,000 to 8,500 babies that he took into his care for the sideshow, and 85% of those premature babies ended up surviving. And so he, was given a lot of credit because all of those babies, those thousands of babies, were just deemed they were going to die by the doctors, and the doctors didn't want to give them any kind of care. And so he took those and he saved several generations of kids from doing his little sideshow. And then he going back, he ended up marrying a nurse that was employed at one of his Infantoriums, is what they would call them, specifically more on the European tour. He married her in 1903 when they started the exhibit here in the United States. And then they had their daughter, Hildegard, who was born 6 weeks premature in 1907. She only weighed 3 pounds. And so she ended up staying in the incubators and staying as part of the sideshow, basically, until it closed in like 1943, because she was in the incubators. And then when she grew up, she went in to be a nurse at the exhibits as well. And he also had an exhibit. What?
I thought you were saying that she was in the incubator until 1943. I was like,
sorry, no, she
a
stayed
long
working
time.
in the exhibits. But he also had an exhibit in Atlantic City as well, and it ran from 1905 to 1943. So it was very successful for that. And the average cost that for each baby, to take care of each baby and for the nurses and staff for each baby, was $15 a day, which today would have been, it's about $405. So to me, that's fairly cheap to take care of. I mean, $400 a day is kind of expensive, but to take care of these babies with that. But every day they would, bathe the babies in lukewarm water. And if the babies were capable, they would give them a small dose of brandy, which I thought was funny.
Well, back then they used.
But I think, keep them calm so they're not crying and everything. But they would tie each baby in a blue or a pink ribbon, and they would use that ribbon to, so the visitors would be able to identify the sex of the infants that were out on display, and they would be displayed to the public all day during the, the hours that the fair was open. And then they would be taken out of their incubators to be cuddled by the nurses in front of the visitors. And they were shown off to the visitors outside of the incubators. And they were fed throughout the day with breast milk, either through a bottle or a wet nurse.
Who supplied did they have a wet nurse there?
Yeah,
or-
so they had wet nurses, and then they, you know, had bottles, and then if the babies weren't able to be fed on their own, they would be spoon fed, where a nurse would drip the breast milk through their nose, which is kind of, you know, like if most of these preemies today have feeding tubes, so it's kind of the same process. It's just without the technologies that we have today. So, but yeah, so they would bring you know, they would really showcase these babies and like do things to emphasize how small they were. And Lucille Horn, she was in the story that she had, she was quoted as saying, like, her dad said she was so small that she fit into the palm of his hand when she was born. Wow. So, I mean, and she was only 2 pounds. So that's tiny. That's like, you know, you have the size of your like cell phone, basically. That's how big these babies were.
Right.
And so it was kind of, you know, it was interesting back then too, but there were a lot of people that were against it because they, you know, they thought that he was just using these infants to get money and to become famous. And they, you know, the fairgrounds, the Coney Island was dirty. So they were worried about, you know, like, you're taking these little fragile infants and putting them in a dirty environment. There were they were showcased next to scandalous shows like the bearded lady, or, you know, the fattest man, you know, those types of things as well. But then there was also in 1911, part of Coney Island caught on fire, and that's when people really started kind of outcrying, because it's very dangerous conditions for these fragile babies. And in the fire, all the babies were rescued, so none of them, you know, met their demise because of a fire. But it did become part of a concern with those types of issues as they went. So I thought it was interesting. But
Yeah.
through the years, he continuously tried to, especially in like New York and New Jersey, in that area, he tried to donate these incubators to the hospitals. And every time he, you know, like went to like market them and everything, they basically like would laugh in his face and, you know, like, this is not what we're doing. These babies are not meant to survive. They're weaklings. And so it was just not accepted. And so he attempted for years to do that. And like I said, it wasn't until like around the mid 1940s, 1943, when the hospital started to utilize them, and they started becoming part of the mainstream of maternity wards, which is why he ended up shutting the sideshow down in 1943, because they were starting to be used in hospitals. And so babies were able to get the care that they needed, which it shut down in 1943. And then in 1944, the Luna Park part of Coney Island burned down. So where those babies would have been, it could have ended very disastrously. So I've seen several different books, but there was one, Miracle at Coney Island, by Claire Prentice, I think is how you say her name. Kind of details this. And like I said, there was some news stories. The last one I saw news story wise was like in 2018. And Lucille Horn was one of the people that was quoted in there, along with Beth Allen, who was another one of the babies that was in the incubators. And I couldn't find if she was still alive. I was trying to find if they had a list of, you know, like any of these babies that were still alive. I'm sure there are, because it closed down in 1943. So I would assume that the last baby born would have been born in 1943 that was used in these size shows. But I couldn't find anything, and I'm assuming some of these babies probably don't want their story to be known because it's such a unique situation. And that's what Lucille Horn had said too, you know, like, that it's kind of weird thinking that, you know, she was showcased as an infant, you know, through the first 6 months of her life, but at the same time, she's still alive and she lived to be 96. So like, what does it matter to her? Because she's alive.
Right.
So you know, like, there's some ups and downs, but I thought it was kind of fascinating, this tool that is used in hospitals today. And now it's like 1 in 10 babies, I think. I can't remember now, but 1 in 10 babies is born premature. And today, so 1 in 10 babies is using this incubator that was created in the late 19th century. And,
Right.
And was part of a sideshow, which I think is kind of neat on that. So I want to share my screen because I do have some cool pictures. Let me see.
It does kind of show that, like, if he stopped the show in 1943, which is when hospitals started using the machine more often, it does show that, like, he wasn't just doing it for fame. Like, if he wanted to do it for fame, he could have continued to do it and showcase these babies.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's what I was trying to see. Like, I was trying to blow this picture up, but it just takes me to a different page. So these are the nurses holding up. There's 6 babies. I can do math.
They each held in their own hands. Wow.
Yeah. So, but this picture here. This is Dr. Martin Couney, and holding up 2 babies. And I want to say, so there was one picture that I was trying to find. I found it on my phone, but I don't think I can find it here. But this is.
Those are the incubators.
So they were just like lined up like this, and then people, would be able to walk through and see. Oops.
Wow.
And see the exhibits and stuff. So I think it's pretty cool to see this. So this picture, this is the one I wanted to show. This is a baby who weighed 23 ounces when it was born.
Jeez.
That's how small it was. And the nurse that is holding the baby is Dr. Coney's daughter, Hildegard. I think that's how you say her name. So that is his daughter, who was a premature baby that was part of the sideshow as well. So
and she doesn't look like she's a premature baby.
No,
she's healthy and
So there's another picture with the incubators, and they're pretty similar to what they look like today. I mean, I think they're more like efficient today, but it is, and they're not made of glass and metal anymore, I don't think. I'm not 100% sure, but he did make sure that that here's another one with the incubator. Yeah, 3 babies in there.
Oh my gosh.
So, and that's but he did make sure too that like he was worried about the babies getting enough air when everything was closed in, and so he made sure that air was being pumped in, and that the air was being pumped in was clean air. So he created a filtration system that would take out any toxins from the air, so these babies were getting the purest air that they could, and getting everything. And so it was like there was like a water pump that would pump warm water down in like the basin down here. So, and then it was like heated up, and so that it was kind of like you'd think like a heating pad almost, kind of a situation, which I think is kind of where what they do now in the hospitals, where it's more electric. But so this lady here is Lucille Horn, and this is her daughter. I don't know what her daughter's name is. So I don't know. I think it's pretty amazing. A lot of these people, I'm sure, lived long lives because this one person, let's see if we can get
he was dedicated
to doing this. And like I said, the first incubators in France were introduced into the maternity wards in 1880. So it took United States a long time to accept this technology, and
it was already running how long in France?
18. So they put the first one in the maternity, or they were introduced into the maternity wards in 1880.
Wow.
And
it's almost 60 years prior.
Yeah, right. 60 years, like 50, 60 years before United States.
So they were saving lives way before we even.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
well, think
And
we're
the doctors
still
are
in
so
that
much-
kind of situation.
Well, the doctors are so dedicated in different countries.
Right. So, and yeah, here's Lucille Horn too. That's,
Ah,
like and this is, yeah, so the NPR, this is from the story from NPR. So I don't know. I thought, well, let's do a happy story.
it is a happy story.
Kind of, I don't know. I just thought this was such a fascinating thing that, like, I'm sure people don't realize, what it, like what it was like, but, or that, there's so many people that have kids in the NICU that this is where it began. This is kind of where it all started. And, like, how many people would willingly take their kid to a sideshow, and just here's another good picture of a baby in one of them. But, like, and I think that was something too, where, like, the parents, they may have been apprehensive about taking their kid to a sideshow, and, like, doing, putting them out for display for everybody. But at the same time, they were desperate to save their kids, because Beth,
And how many of them stayed with their kids? That
I couldn't find. I'm sure some of them were like, nope, I don't want any, I'm sure there were some, but it sounded like most of the parents, like, they may have not been there every day, but they took their kids home after they graduated from the incubators.
Huh.
So yeah. So here's a New York Times infant
Wow.
incubators.
Incubator. Wow.
Yeah.
With living infants.
Yeah.
My,
Here's
my
an
Aunt
incubator now. This is what it would look like in today's world.
Wow.
So not really too far off.
my
No.
Aunt Rosalie,
Yeah.
she only weighed, well, my grandma says, of course, this would have been mid-20s in the boondocks,
Mm-hmm.
She had a baby at home, and
Yeah.
she said it only weighed a pound.
Yeah.
And she said the doctor came to the house, delivered him, but just kind of like tossed her aside and said, well, she won't live, and left.
Yes, and that's kind
And
of
my
what was
grandma made a little bed, little thing, and
Yeah.
put it. It was in the winter times. Put it right by the fireplace,
Mm-hmm.
and she never had a weight problem in her, or she was never unnourished her life.
Right.
And she lived a long life.
And she lived to be in her 90s.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But that was kind of what was going on back then too, is that the doctors would be like, this baby's not going to survive. It's a weakling. And, they saw it as the way of, like humans, Homo sapiens way of, like, that's the runt of the litter. We don't eat it, but we just dispose of it, in the wild. They, like, eat the runt of the litter, or, they just leave it for dead.
Right.
So, but
I do wonder if your grandma, like I'm sure she had a radio, and I'm sure this was the story that people talked about back then. So I wonder if maybe your grandma heard the story on the radio, or heard of the story of the incubators,
Right.
and was like, well, if
Wow. I doubt that she knew anything about incubators. I mean,
well, I don't think she knew what incubator was, but she was hearing, like, stories of a doctor saving premature underweight babies by keeping them warm and keeping them by, like, a warm.
I don't know.
You know.
She's like your mother. Like, she's gonna make it work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Right. She ain't gonna throw her baby away. She's gonna make it, whatever it took. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and she didn't say I heard this. She just said I just made her a little bed and kept her right by the fireplace. I never took her away from there.
Right.
And
Well, and that's something too, like, back then too, most births were done at home.
right.
Like, you
house.
weren't in a hospital setting, and you didn't have the care that you get now, or, that kind of stuff. So, like, when your baby was born, like, you just made a bed out of a drawer kind of thing.
Right.
And,
Right.
did your best. So I don't know.
No doubt she just found some little box or a drawer or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's kind of, I don't know. I just thought it was fascinating that like we've come so far, and this one person is basically responsible for, like 65 to 7,500 kids that are, or, people that were alive in the generations of families that they were able to have because of him.
Right. Think of all of the families that are still alive, that if it wasn't for their grandmother or grandfather,
Yeah.
they would not be here today.
Yeah. And so Lucille Horn and then Beth Ann, those were the two that I found in all the stuff that I could find. Those were the only two that I found named. And both of them were born, they were twins, and the twin died at birth. So, and the doctor basically said, nope, this one's going to die too. Just be prepared for it. So,
Wow.
yeah. So I don't know. And I didn't find anywhere that, like there were twins that survived because of this incubator or anything like that. But that is something that happens now too, that usually like if you have twins, they're a lower birth weight than a normal baby or like a singleton baby or pregnancy, and a lot of times they need to go into an incubator, or even kids that are, jaundice when they're born, though they go into an incubator, they go into the lights and all that kind of stuff. Those babies would have just been tossed aside and you'd have been said, sorry, sucks,
Right.
But I don't know. I thought that was interesting. That was like all the facts that I had. So
That's
Yeah.
a very great story.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It sure beats all these scary ones.
Well, that's what I thought. Babies that were able to survive.
Yes.
They may have been a sideshow, but
But, well, and I bet the thing is, like, even if they're a sideshow, the more money he makes on that sideshow, the more incubators he can have
Right,
produced,
right.
And
the
that's-
more
yeah, and that's
babies he
kinda
can
weird.
save.
yeah.
He
And that's
really
what he
was
was kind of
financing.
thinking
He was
too.
using the sideshow to finance his idea.
Finances,
Right.
yeah.
And on top of it, he
And
he
teach people.
was excited to charge visitors because the more people that came, like the parent, he didn't want to charge the parents to have their kids be there. And so
Right.
think about that, like even in today, like if these incubators were out, I'm, like they don't have maternity wards really, or like the nurseries rather, in hospitals anymore because of safety issues. But, like people love to see infant babies. They love to see newborn babies. Think about if the hospitals did stuff like that, where like, oh, you could pay, $20 to go look at these, NICU babies and see them behind the glass, and, like keep them so that they can't get in there, and touch the babies or whatever. But I'm sure people would pay for it, especially if
I could have made some
Yeah,
money from
that's-
my family if they would have.
like when Matt was in the hospital and I, like was there for like months on end kind of a situation, I would have paid $20 to go look at little babies. And, people get happy when they see babies. I would have
That's
done it.
true.
That's true.
Yeah.
People love babies.
Yeah, but like Jessie said, the reason that got shut down was because a lot of babies were getting kidnapped because people were like,
Yes.
ooh,
Yeah.
babies.
Yeah.
Let me go take that one.
Yeah. And I know
Well-
when Odin was born, he was born at Sparrow Hospital in Lansing, and they do not have a nursery, but they always like they give the option like, hey, if you need to like send your kid away, we'll just take them down to the nurse's station. And I remember thinking like, I told Matt, I'm like, I don't care if I'm asleep, you better be awake and you better have your eye on this kid, because to me that seems even more dangerous. But
They want him to work the nurse's station.
yeah, but they do
Answering the
have.
phone.
I know. So when Odin was born, they had his ID bracelet on his wrist. I think both wrists. And then they had like a security tag kind of ID bracelet on both of his ankles. And I remember when we were getting ready to leave, the nurse came in to cut him off and he was missing one of his like security tag from his ankle. I don't know what happened with it. I have no idea. And the nurse is like, what happened? I'm like, I don't know. And it was kind of, we had like this moment of like, are they going to let us leave with this kid?
Well, somebody was just kind of walking around with them and got in trouble because they kind of left the room and went
That was
me.
actually that was
Remember.
I want to say that was at a different hospital when I was back in the hospital. Because
No, I think it was at there because it might have been me. You know, I was just kind of holding them and walking around.
oh yes,
pacing.
you know what? Yes,
And-
it was because if you were out in the hallway walking around, you had to have them in the bassinet. You couldn't
know.
carry. Yeah.
I got in trouble anyhow, like I was trying to kidnap them.
Yeah. But yeah,
Well,
they have securities in place. But I
they
think
have it
too,
for a reason.
They were suspicious because I didn't know my daughter's name when I came in there.
You did call her.
My
Yeah, you did
daughter's
call her by
having
the
a
name.
baby.
yeah.
And they were like, no, nobody by that name. I'm like, well, it's my daughter. I think I know her name. She's having a baby. No, we can't find him. And finally, Cass said, that's not her name. I'm like, oh, yeah.
She has a new last name. Not even new.
It wasn't new by that point.
No,
It was not new at that point.
I was just still, it took that for me to accept that name
Okay.
that you were. Well, anyways.
But I do think, like it would be, there are a lot of safety issues in today's world and today's society, but I do think it would be kind of a way to raise money for hospitals to kind of display the babies and have people pay. Because I think a lot of people would do that because you're at a hospital visiting somebody that is sick. It's usually not a happy situation. So
That's not a good idea.
uh
No.
Yeah.
Because then they'd be like, no, I want to see the one with the arm coming out of the forehead. That one.
yeah, that would, I guess that's true. And that is something too. So he, back in the early 1900s, 1903 to 1943, he accepted any baby, any race, any any religion, so he just would take any baby. He didn't care what it looked like or what its background, what its parents' background was. So if it was a purple baby born from the devil, he would have taken the baby because that's all he cared about was the baby's health.
Good.
So I thought it was interesting. So I don't know. I thought it was cool. And I thought it was cool that apparently he was born in Prussia. So interesting fact right there.
Yeah.
So
Nice. Good story.
it was a happy story. No,
Yeah.
I mean there were some deaths,
Well,
I guess.
channel
but-
is about unsolved mysteries.
Well, that's okay. We can have every once in a while. I mean,
And-
it's the mystery.
and-
It's the mystery of the invention of the
Yes,
incubator.
it
That's
is.
the mystery.
It's
It
a
is.
fascinating story, okay? So there's not really a bunch of mystery, but
Well,
it's
the
a mystery on
It is.
where did-
how it kept that child alive is the mystery. It's
The
fantastic.
title of our channel is The Family School of Thoughts. We're educating people on mysteries we find fascinating.
yeah.
Right. There you go.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go.
I did debate on doing this one though, because I was thinking like there's not really mystery to it. There's not, but I find it fascinating. And I
like
decided,
it.
you know what, I'm gonna do it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it was good. And it kind of linked up with Mom's, what was her name? The Chicago World Fair with the Chicago World Fair.
Yes. Yeah, and that's what I was
blanking
thinking
on,
too. Yes. H.H. Holmes.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's what I was thinking too, because then I was thinking, wow, I wonder how many of those parents of those babies that were taken over were murdered by H.H. Holmes.
I was wondering when was he at the World Fair, or like when was he active at the World Fair?
I don't remember now.
Because it said that they were at the World Fair in 1920.
1933 and 1934. So he was there at the World Fair for 18 months. Let's see. I'm getting onto the Wikipedia. Well, okay, well, hold on.
Because I feel like he was there in like the 1930s, if I'm remembering correctly.
Well,
Well,
I've
the
seen
Fair in
no,
Chicago.
because so H.H. Holmes, so they must have done a second World Fair in Chicago. So this must have been different. Because I was thinking the same thing. Because he was executed in 1896.
Oh, never
So
mind then.
yeah.
Well, it's the World's Fair is it's like almost like
Yeah.
it's not the Olympics, but like it happens like
Yeah.
pretty much bi-yearly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it happened for a very, very long time.
So that must have been a different Chicago World. Obviously, it was a different Chicago World Fair, but
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was super cool and something that maybe our listeners didn't know, and that's something that now we use, like hospitals use on a regular basis, and it saves babies' lives, and now people take it super seriously. So.
Yeah. I think it's good. I just actually, now that I'm thinking about it, had somebody complain that we were doing too many child death stories. So this is just a happy one.
There you go. Now I just provided 65 to 7,500 child lives.
Right.
Survival
we're
stories.
Yeah.
We can do survival stories. There you go. It's a survival story.
There you go. Yeah. So it's and there was an NPR story, and then there was multiple books that I saw that were kind of written on it. So I don't know. I haven't read any of the books, but I thought it was kind of interesting. I'm sure there's some kind of documentary out somewhere that kind of, or I did see like PBS had like a news article, so I'm assuming there's like a documentary or some kind of.
I feel like I've seen a documentary on this before.
Yeah, so I'm sure there's something out there, but I didn't look into it that deep on that one, so I don't know. I thought it was cool, and I thought it was pretty cool that some of the survivors lived into their 90s. So,
Right. Good story.
Yeah.
Good lives.
So that is it. That's all I have.
All right.
Upside down
Yay.
pineapples and babies that survived because of incubators.
I'm going to be watching for those upside down pineapples.
Well, I'm just glad that, do what you want, but I'm kind of glad that you didn't know what it means.
Right?
Sure.
You do you. I don't really care, but I'm kind of glad you guys didn't know what it meant. Anything else on Jessie's story, though, about the incubators?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Do you think all the babies were baptized that were in the incubators?
No. Especially if he took babies from different religions and he didn't care about their background, I
don't think so
I
either.
doubt they were all baptized.
Right. What do you think you
But
had?
I did. So,
Baptized.
I forgot to mention this though too. There were like some of like the Lucille Horn's dad, hailed a taxi. He took her down there, but there were times that he actually went to maternity wards waiting for premature babies to be born, and then would like kind of convince the parents, "Hey, come, I can help you." So he's kind of like that ambulance chaser to get people to come too. So, I thought that was kind of interesting.
Saving lives.
Saving
right?
the baby too.
Yeah. So I'm sure, what the ones that had the babies that actually survived, those parents they didn't care. They had a baby. So
I'm sure they were grateful.
yeah. And he had an 85% success rate. That's pretty high, I think.
That's pretty high
Especially
for
back in
the invention of
1900s.
something.
Yeah,
The
1900s.
invention of something.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I thought it was a pretty cool thing.
We've come a long ways.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I think that's it for the episode.
I think that's
Yes.
Don't know how much more we can talk about
Scene.
it.
So, anybody else got anything you want to add to today's story?
Nope.
All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up for tonight's show. Please, everybody, push the like button, share our channel with your friends.
Subscribe.
Subscribe to our channel. It helps us out greatly. And for sure, give us any thoughts and ideas through our email, thefamilyschoolofthought@gmail.com. All right? All right, guys. Thank you much. Have a good week. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.